What really went down with the Juancho Hernangomez deal and what is next for the Boston Celtics? Going to break it all down for you with Keith Smith right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
And welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Thank you for making this show part of your daily routine and your first listen every day. Locked On Celtics is free everywhere podcasts exist, Monday through Friday. You get free podcasts every workday, every week, and you get the show on YouTube. Please check out the show on YouTube. Very much appreciate everyone who's been subscribing lately. Thank you very much for that. I'm John Karalis. I cover the team for Boston Sports Journal, and I've written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars, available now wherever books are sold online, and you can get a copy on my site, johnkaralis.com, a personalized autographed copy for $30. Today, Keith Smith joins me to break down the final specifics of the Juancho Hernangomez trade, why it was done the way it was done, why didn't the Celtics get Bryn Forbes, all of those questions answered, plus what position does that put Boston in? What can they do now? And what is potentially next? It's all right now in this conversation with Keith Smith. All right, Keith, I was just joking before we started this that you must be as busy as my brother, the accountant, is at tax season. This is like, you are in like high demand at this point.
I mean, I guess. I mean, it's nice to be wanted, but yeah, it gets tricky at this time of year because everybody's got a million questions about the cap and the tax and where things can go trade wise and all those sorts of things and who has what and all that. But it's a lot of fun. As I said to you before we started, it's better than living in the real world and doing a 9 to 5.
100%. My brain doesn't work in a way where I would just naturally take to CBA and tax stuff. Like anything that I get right when it comes to this is like 60% luck, 40% like cramming like hell. So I'm glad to have you on to help support this. But how hard is it? Before we get into the particulars, because we're going to start with this Juancho stuff in a minute. I struggle with the finer points of just the Celtics stuff, and that's my job. You are like on top of 30 NBA teams. How is it possible to stay on top of that? Is it just like your brain works in a way that like, yeah, that's natural to you?
I think so. I think this is where my prior life working for Disney really helped set me up because when working there, I always had a million different things going on at once. I never supported just one area. It was always a whole bunch of different places and, a million people asking questions all at once and those kind of things. So, I think that helps. I also, I tend to be a very organized. Sorry, our puppy is letting us know he's not happy right now. He thinks it's dinner time. But it's, I tend to be a very organized person. So I like to structure my days in certain ways and those kind of things. So as I do that, I am able to, as stuff floats in, I can drop what I'm doing, react to that and move on. So yeah, it's but I love it. It's, this is what I want to do. I always have I have them open right now. My salary sheets are always open. So at a moment's off we go. So yeah, this is the stuff that I love. And I love this time of year.
All right, so let's get into, we'll spend the first part of the show just hammering home the finer points of the Juancho Hernangomez trade, because it does set up, I think this is the first domino to fall. It feels to me like obvious that there are probably 2-3 potential moves coming down the road here. So the moves are, it's Juancho to San Antonio plus $2.15 million in cash. Bol PJ Dozier to the Boston Celtics, Bryn Forbes to the Denver Nuggets. The Celtics create a trade exception the way they've structured this. Is this correct, Keith, that they've structured it in a way where they absorb these players into the Kemba Walker trade exception and now they created a new one, 6.9, which will apparently expire, since the deal was done yesterday, January 19th, 2023.
Yep, you're on it. So they had a $5 million trade exception for Kemba Walker that would have expired this coming summer. And that was the very small ones. A little bit from Jeff Teague left over, a little bit from one other, and they're just not really Moses Brown. Those are just not really usable. So they what they did was they took the two salaries in to the trade exception. Trade exceptions can be split. They can't be combined together, but they can be split. So that's how they absorbed Bol as well as Dozier. And then because of that being the mechanism, they did not have to use any form of salary matching to send Juancho Hernangomez out. So they create a trade exception of his full salary amount, which is about $6.9 million. So yeah, and you're right on the timing. We're back to a normal calendar in the NBA because we're not doing all these offsetting dates and all this other stuff. So we're back to normal. So $6.9 million good through January 19th of 2023.
So I can't say the way the timeline of this trade went down was Denver and San Antonio were talking for Bryn Forbes. So one of the common questions is, why not just go for Bryn Forbes? Well, it was Denver and San Antonio that came to a deal for Bryn Forbes. San Antonio had one open roster spot, not two, and Denver wanted to send those two salaries out. So that was an impasse there. They needed a third team, and then they called Boston. So Boston wasn't swooping in and saying, no, we don't want Bryn Forbes. We just want this. So that's why this is. And you can see why that was, because the Celtics sent 2.15 million in to make the amount of money the Spurs wanted to take in the exact same. So that's the Celtics accomplished from here, Keith. They now, instead of being stuck with $6+ million of going to OKC and saying, hey, OKC is like the money laundering of the NBA, right?
Yeah.
This is where you got to get clean. So instead of going to OKC and saying, "Hey, here's what can you do to take the $6+ million," and they're like, "Well, that's gonna cost you," versus you participate in this deal. Now you have a couple of smaller deals. Now you go to OKC with one of these guys, and they can't be like, "Well, it's going to cost you a first now." Like, no, it's not going to cost you a first to send $2.1 million of Bol over to them, because now there are other teams with a bunch of these little piddly traded player exceptions that you mentioned. You probably got a list of a bunch of $2.1 million trade exceptions and less that can be played into now. You send them a little cash, you throw extra few $100,000 for your trouble, and boom, that's done. So this is why it was done this way. Bryn Forbes was always going to Denver. Denver had too many people going out. San Antonio said, we're not going to waive a guy to move this guy. And then the Celtics came along as a third team, kind of like I'd been saying all along, like they would be playing the third team role, just not like in this kind of deal that I thought. So this is where the Celtics are, right? So I think we can put that, why didn't they go for Bryn Forbes stuff to bed? That was never a possibility. They didn't refuse that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. What happens in these kind of situations is the most common way is, like you mentioned, Oklahoma City, where you look at it and say, all right, we got to get off some money. All right, Sam Presti's there with waiting arms for a player and a draft pick. Let's go. Or the other option is, who's looking to move some money as well. Now the dog wants into this here.
Don't worry. We're a dog-friendly podcast. The dog wants to hop around, wants to bark.
They're going to go all crazy. They think it's dinner time. That's what the issue is right now. But yeah, so then what happens is, all right, well, Boston wants to clear some money and they have an open roster spot. So that's just, these teams are very smart about how they structure this. See?
There we go.
There she is. So
I love it.
So what
That's gonna be the thumbnail. That's gonna be the thumbnail for when I put it on YouTube. It's gonna be the dog coming in.
Nice, yeah, I love it. Yeah, she is. They think it's dinner time, and they're about an hour early.
Hey, I'm always an hour early for dinner myself, so I
yeah, me too. Tell me about it. But as I was saying, these teams are very smart. They know who's looking to move money, who's looking to, who has an open roster spot that they're sitting on. So it was very easy to piece this together, as well as the Celtics probably knew, all right, something's going on with Bol. Denver obviously is willing to move him. They had already tried. So they were probably engaged to some level of, hey, what's your interest here? And that made it a very easy process. But you're absolutely spot on. There's no point where San Antonio was interested in Juancho Hernangomez for Bryn Forbes straight up. It would have cost Boston far more than throwing a little bit of cash. And you're also right. If they'd waited 3 more weeks, 3 weeks from today is the trade deadline as we record this, to dump Juancho, then all of a sudden the price goes up because now we know you got to get off that money. So, you've got to pay. It wouldn't have gotten to a first round pick, but it probably would have been give us 2 seconds or give us, a second and, a younger guy who maybe you might kind of like or something along those lines.
Sure. But when you're Sam Presti and, look, we like to kind of fictionalize what trade talks are, and it's always like very combative and people are always trying to screw each other over. I don't think it's like that. I think there's much more cooperation. Everybody's trying to get a job done. But when you're in a position of power, you do what Danny Ainge did, and what Wyc Grousbeck told Danny Ainge to do in the Brooklyn Nets trade. See if you can get one more pick. Right? Like, the deal was done, and Wyc says, go get one more pick and make it unprotected. And you're in a position of power. Prokhorov wanted to buy a champion, and there it was right there. So congratulations on getting that extra pick. Kind of worked out for them. So Sam Presti would do the same thing because, especially in Oklahoma City, you've positioned yourself to be in this spot, right? To be the clearinghouse for all of the bad contracts in the NBA. So, hey, take advantage of it. When a team is going to be desperate, you hold out and you say, all right, you got no other options. But now with Juancho going out, now they do have other options. So that's the breakdown of the Juancho deal. We'll get into the future, what's next, Dennis Schröder, all coming up after I tell you about BetOnline, which would like to wish you a very happy new betting year as we head into the continuation of the football playoffs and beyond. BetOnline is the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, new updated website, new updated mobile site. So sign up today for a 50% welcome bonus with the promo code LOCKEDON. Just use that promo code LOCKEDON, 50% extra in your account with that first deposit. So whatever your favorite sport is you want to bet on, that's fine. It's all there. Your favorite Vegas casino games too. So head on over to BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. This also, I think, takes the heat off of a salary dumping Dennis Schröder trade, where I still think it makes sense to trade him for assets because I don't like the fit. I think he's better off going somewhere else. Even if he re-signed for $5 million, whatever the number is, I don't want him back. But the Celtics can do that. The Celtics can keep him. So I think one side effect here is maybe they want to kick the tires on a Bol or PJ Dozier, but they can very easily get off that money. Simply, it's not going to cost them any picks. They're getting off of nearly $7 million of salary without sending out any picks, which is huge because now you save those picks to send out something else if you need to, or grease the skids in another 3-team trade. So where do you see the net effect here of the Juancho Hernangomez trade?
Yeah, there's a couple pieces here. And we all know I famously came on here and ranted about being cheap and avoiding the tax at all costs and those kind of things. But the math has changed now. The situation has changed now. This team they're average. Right. I don't buy into everybody who says that they're awful and the worst team in the league and all that stuff. They're not. They're 500. They're a perfectly average team that's probably going to maybe make the playoffs, maybe not. We'll see. But when you're in that position, you should 100% not be paying the luxury tax. I don't have a ton of interest in saving, billionaires money. I don't really care about that part of it. What I care about is what Brad Stevens can now do, assuming, because now it would almost be negligent to not get out of the tax. But what he can now do is a year from now, 2 years from now, go to Wick and say, hey, remember when I saved you 10 million in tax payments? I need a little bit extra to, make this team what I think it should be. And hopefully that's where that is repaid. And I until they prove otherwise, because they haven't cheaped out on paying for a true title contender yet. I'm going to continue to believe ownership. Now I get it. People who are frustrated saying, well, they're not doing everything they can to build a title contender. Maybe, that could be fair. But what the reality is, just as you start looking at math, is they're now one more small deal away from getting out of the tax entirely. Doesn't even have to be Dennis Schröder anymore. It can be Bol. It can be PJ Dozier. It can be Bruno Fernando. Because where they're going to be is, assuming Jaylen Brown's not going to hit all of his incentives, they're about 850,000-ish. Over the tax at the end of the year. So what they can do then is they can just, by the deadline, move off one of those guys, and then you're under. And you're right where you need to be, and you go. And that will happen. Whether it's a bigger trade or it's a straight, that is the OKC, hey, take this guy on with a second-round pick trade. And if that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. The Schröder question becomes interesting to me because you could accomplish the same thing by moving him out. I don't know that you're going to return any kind of amazing return for Dennis Schröder, but you can get something good for him if you want to. Some teams are always looking for bench scoring that are contenders, which is what Boston was looking for when they signed him. The hope with the Celtics was Dennis Schröder. We know this is a one-year thing, but he gives us that lift and pushes us into a deeper playoff run than we might have made otherwise. The other thing I'll leave completely open because, as I said, 3 weeks to go till the trade deadline. I don't expect this just the way the season has gone. But let's say they do go on a run here where they win, 4 or 5 in a row, and all of a sudden it's like, all right, hey, maybe this team is a little bit better. What you can do now is because you cleared that $7 million for Juancho, you can go make a trade that maybe does still keep you in the tax, but you've lessened that tax burden. Mm-hmm. You're not climbing into the second and third tier of the tax. So what ultimately happens is you turn it into, hey, we can go and we can build this up and move it on. So I think that's less likely. I think that's pretty far down on the list, just the way the season has gone. But that is a possibility that we need to own as well, because sometimes it's not about avoiding the tax, but it's about lessening the tax bill.
Right. I still feel like we're in avoid the tax territory.
Oh yeah,
yeah. First of all, I do want to reiterate your preface from before. This isn't about saving, Wick Grossbeck at all money. Like, they're all rich, but business is business, and we have to deal in reality, right? We have to deal with, right, exactly. That's what I was saying. What's the dog's name?
That one is, his name is actually Tatum. He's Tatum. My daughter's dog, and she named him.
Yes. So Tatum, I agree with your displeasure in that sentiment, but this is how it is, the split, the fandom and reality, where in fandom, you just spend your damn money. Like, you make money, you've got money coming in, spend some of it and you should be fine. Like, you're not like, you're going to be fine, but business is business. And we have to deal with, if you and I are actually going to do a podcast where people who listen can actually come away with something, you got to deal with the reality is, and that is they are trying to get underneath the tax because they, for various reasons that you've mentioned, they don't want to trigger the repeater a year earlier because that's going to be an issue down the road. And they are going to get $13 million or so in tax payments from the actual tax-paying teams, which, that's not nothing. And I don't care who you are, that $13 million coming in is you're paying salaries with that, right? You're paying Brad, you're paying Ime, you're paying the coaching staff. You basically got them for free for a year. So that's meaningful to any business.
Sure. So, if I can add to that too, it's important to remember, I think people have lost sight of it because we're now a year removed, but they did not go to large capacity until pretty late in last season. So they lost more money than over half the league did just from ticket revenue. Now, they didn't lose as much as Toronto is losing right now, or Oklahoma City, who didn't have fans all of last season, lost, but they opened up fully, or whatever new fully is, because I know they've made some changes to that. They opened that up later than a lot of other teams did. And again, it's not about saying, oh, poor Wick Grossbeck, I'm sure he's struggling to eat. It's not about that. But it's what happens is when you pay the tax for a team that's not a contender, I always view it as you're throwing good money after bad. And that just doesn't make sense. I don't, in everybody has their limits. Steve Ballmer, even the richest owner in the league, he could go buy another team today if it was allowed. He told the Clippers, hey, let's loosen, get this number down a little bit, just because it's again, I think he quit very astutely read. We're not going to probably be very great this year. Let's get that number down. And now I 100% hope and believe that Brad Stevens can then parlay this in a year or two into, now I need you to pay it. So now let's go. And that's the thing, because that's what this is setting up to do. This is setting up to, we've got Jason Tatum, we've got Jaylen Brown. We're going to add somebody else to this, and we're going to be a pretty expensive team. And I need you to not balk when that day comes, because remember when we were floundering around 500 and didn't really have a reason to pay the tax? We didn't. And and I believe ownership will do that, because under this ownership group during the KG and Pierce years, they paid a lot of luxury tax during that period of time. And they were, very deep into the tax because of the way everything was structured. So I do believe that they will pay the tax when they need to.
Right. And that now the question is getting to the point where they need to. And look, we can fold in TV money that's going to jump, and who knows how that's going to change the calculus here. But, also the first year of the new TV money is the year that Jason Tatum can opt out. So that's going to be one hell of a contract that Jason Tatum's going to sign. So the finances are all what they are here. But so the Celtics are in this position. This is we've gotten to a point now where there are still a couple of financial moves left, but we can transition into we've got the selling stuff. Now we can transition into the buying stuff. So I still think there are seller moves to make. Like I said before, I still believe Schröder for a pick or 2 second-round picks is something that they should really, really explore. And now you wonder, does Chicago want to do that because Lonzo is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks? Are there other teams out there? Are there Denver Nuggets who are still hanging on here? Are they going to be looking to do something more than Bryn Forbes? Who knows? I think sending Schröder out, clearing down to $5 million or so below, with the option of going even deeper. You can still clear Dozier and Fernando and, Bol. You can still do all of that stuff and get yourself down below the tax to a significant portion. Now, I think that allows them to participate in 3-team deals, other deals, to actually say, okay, I think the best use of the Celtics assets moving forward is you still want to get useful players, but you're not actively going to say, oh, here's Romeo for that guy, here's this guy for that guy. You're going to save these piddly guys as, okay, maybe you have to take Bol in this trade as what you're sending out, but then the Celtics get back useful player from a team that has to make a hard decision, that has to give something to get something as part of a 3-team deal. I think that's something that I still kind of sort of expect the Celtics to be at least involved. I don't know if they're going to pull it up. I still think they could be involved in.
Yeah, completely agree. I think my point has been, by the time we hit February 10th, probably a week ahead of that, really, you have to know what your direction is for the remainder of this season. Are we going to run with what we have? Are we going to try to add to it? Or are we going to move some of these players? Tanking, it's not turning mental. What it is it's turning it to, we're going to free up minutes for Peyton Pritchard, Romeo Langford, Aaron Nesmith, and go. I don't think it becomes a tanking season where it's like, now all of a sudden Jason Tatum's out for a month and Jaylen Brown is out. I don't think they're going to do that. I especially think those guys they're not wired or built that way. They want to play, which we could get into that with Tatum in a little bit if you want to. But I think you have to pick that direction because that needs to be your mindset for the rest of the year. Has to be what are our goals here? Like I said, if over the next 2 weeks they rip off a whole bunch of wins and all of a sudden it looks really good as they get this full roster together and all that stuff, then maybe you do look at adding to the team and saying, all right, hey, we finally got healthy. We finally caught some rhythm. We think we can make a playoff run and we're going to add. I would just not do any additions that are a 1 year go for it addition because they're not that close. But if you could add, hey, this guy helps for the rest of this year and he helps next year, great. Go ahead. By all means, do it. If it's a Harrison Barnes type of player or something like that, where he's got another year under contract, and maybe you do that. Then the other option, which I do think is more likely, is that hey, let's move. What you can't do is, I don't think you can wake up February 11th and have this roster look very much like what it looks like now. It doesn't need to be wide sweeping changes, but either add guys or get some of the guys out and let the kids, play more, because otherwise now what you've done is really, you've kind of turned it into a middle of the road wasted year, which isn't great in my book. They've won too much already to fully tank and bottom out, but to keep just rolling out and win one, lose one, win one, lose one, lose two, win one, that's fine the rest of the way after the 10th. I have no issue with that.
All right, going to come back to wrap up the show with Keith in just a minute here, getting into the potential for Al Horford. What happens with Al Horford? Does he move by the deadline next summer? Does he move at all? We're going to talk about that coming up next. First, let's talk about Built Bar, which is going to help you keep those New Year's resolutions. I know we're about 20 days here into January, three weeks into January. Hopefully you're sticking to those resolutions. Built Bar is going to make it easier by replacing those guilty pleasures, those chocolate bars, those snacks that you have hidden around. Built Bar is better. They're 130 calories, approximately 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, 17 grams of protein. That's a little variation there, maybe 150 calories, 170 calories, but they're definitely not the chocolate bars that are 240 or 250 calories or worse with 30 grams of sugar and dozens of net carbs. So if you've got a nut allergy, these are going to be fine for you. If you are trying out the keto diet, these are accepted in that. These work. And whatever flavors you like, do you like minty stuff, chocolate stuff, coconut stuff? It's all there. Peanut butter, which I just am a sucker for. It's all there, and it's covered in 100% chocolate. So it's a great protein bar to have after you work out. It's great as a meal replacement in the morning. It's great just to snack on to satisfy a craving, and it's going to help you keep that resolution. The best part is you can go every day you want to go to Built.com, and you can use the promo code LOCK15. Every single time, you're going to get 15% off. Every single time. If you go 20 times in the month, you'll get 20 different chances to use that promo code LOCK15. So check it out. Try it. Sample. Poke around. There's a lot of great stuff on that site. 15% off your order at Built.com with the promo code LOCK15. Just to add to that one point, like bringing in a guy that can help this year but may not have a longer-term impact is another reason why Bryn Forbes wasn't part of this. Like an expiring contract like that maybe sort of helps you. But
if I can real quick, because people will counter with, and because they've done this to me, but they did that with Evan Fournier. The difference was they always knew they could sign and trade Fournier.
Yeah, but they did that with Fournier
later either.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, what I was saying, I'm sorry, I might have cut out for a second there. With Fournier, what you can do is they knew because his contract was so large that they could always turn around and sign and trade him for a useful player or for another trade exception. Forbes doesn't make enough money, nor do you have the ability to do that with. So you're not going to acquire a low salary player for 1 year and then turn around and do much with him. Whereas with Fournier, the idea was, hey, let's try to make a playoff run at the time they acquired him. And then as that went south, they still knew, hey, even if we don't keep him, we can turn around and trade him later.
Right. Right. That was that. I always viewed that as sort of an extension of the Gordon Hayward TPE.
Yep,
Like that
that's
was
exactly what it was.
that to me didn't bother me. Forbes coming in, unless you send Schröder out, you're already starting Marcus Smart. Whose minutes was he going to take?
Yeah,
that was always going to be the issue. So,
sure.
all right, but like I said before, there are teams out there, and this is how the trade deadline always goes. There are injuries out there. There are dynamics that change on certain teams that suddenly make things like Al Horford, who I never really considered trading, but I always understood that there was a possibility. Maybe Al Horford is more desirable now. I think he was always mentioned with Golden State, but that didn't make sense until Draymond Green goes down with a calf injury that's somehow connected to a disc injury, which means that's some sort of nerve thing. And I don't know what that could mean, because that's all of a sudden it just hurts and then it stops. And then I don't know how long he's going to be out, but considering the role that he's in, facilitator, high post guy, bring the ball up and defend and quarterback that defense, you could do a lot worse than Al Horford replacing him in that role. He's not as spry. He's not going to be as quick as Draymond, and he's not going to have that same chemistry. But I think you could plug Al Horford in there and have him replicate a fairly high percentage of what Draymond can do.
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. And clearly taking on the money is not a barrier for that team. They will do what they need to do. And I think they are very much in a position where, hey, this may be the last run for this group.
And that's the thing. That's the whole
we
point
need
right
to,
there.
yeah, we need to maximize however big or small this window is. We need to maximize it the rest of the way, because who knows how many great Curry years we have left. Clay is back, but I mean, that's scary right after missing 2 years. And now Draymond, if he's having these, what's going on? And yeah, I mean, if you could pry away, one of their young guys that they just drafted, absolutely, but by all means, go make that happen. The other nice thing too is, I keep bringing this up with folks, is if you do an Al Horford trade, you could, and you structure it the right way, you can turn that 17 million Fournier TPE by absorbing the player, much like they just did in this Juancho trade. You absorb the $1 million TPE for Al Horford. And I know people are like, great, cool, we can be the boss TPE Celtics. And, I mean, I get it. I do. I really do get it. But this is all about maximizing your assets when you can and where you can. And that's a good way for the Celtics to do it.
Yeah, and this is it. You got to be advantageous. So whatever you take back can just go into that TPE. So you can do, I don't know that they do Wiseman and Kuminga, but theoretically they could say, well, we don't need Wiseman, and Kuminga is okay, but like you got to give something to get something. And Al Horford, whatever. Let's just say they justify it. That's $14 million, $14.5 million that goes into the TPE, and then Horford goes out. And that works. So I don't know. I'm not saying that I expect that to happen, but these are the types of things that we need to watch for in the next few weeks, that these guys are able to take advantage of teams that suddenly would say, no, we don't want Al Horford. But then all of a sudden, oh, well, Draymond, if Draymond's out for the rest of the season, or if he's going to be limited, then all of a sudden that changes for all of the stuff that you said. You just got Clay back. You're playing great. Take advantage of this opportunity now, because at some point soon you're going to it's all going to go away. And they have this advantage that the Celtics don't, which is they own the Chase Center. They get all the money from the Chase Center.
Right.
They print the money from all the other stuff that they do there. So no, they don't want to spend a ton in taxes, but like no one does, but they can do it knowing like, it's all going to work out. So when you scan the league, do you see any other kind of obvious places that may be targets for the Celtics to say, maybe we can hop in here for this trade that they're looking for, or maybe a third team that they can hop in on? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, The third team stuff is interesting if they can get under the tax, because then you have the ability to kind of maybe poach a youngish guy from somebody just because you have the team. The 48, which is 17 million, but they also have the Tristan Thompson one, which is 9.7 million, which is a
Right.
valuable chunk. And now they have this new Juancho one of almost 7 million. So if you wanted to jump in and, snag a young player off a team just to be a facilitator, you could do that. Again, that comes with getting under the tax by enough to do that without putting yourself right back over. When I look at Al Horford, though, I look at, could Dallas be interested if the Mavericks, who are playing pretty good right now, could you talk? Basically, it's any team that loses a big man the rest of the way. Can we interest you in Al Horford? And I think that may be something that you can do, because part of your pitch is, hey, remember, he's only $14.5 million guaranteed next year, unless your team goes to or wins the finals, at which point you don't really care what his guarantee becomes, because you're in the finals or you won the finals. So you're plenty happy to do that. So that's where I think over the next 2 weeks, they're really going to be, hey, you're down a big. Do you want to look at Al Horford and see where, hey, are we interested in, because you need a point guard? Hey, let's take a look there.
Yeah. So if you had to guess, because this is the question, and I hate when people ask me this, but I'm going to turn around and ask it to you. I think the Celtics are poised to make other moves. Like I do think so. Obviously, there is another salary cap clearing move coming. One of these guys, Bruno, Dozier, Bulbul, one of those guys is probably not going to stick around. And that's just to get under the tax. That'll clear up a second roster spot. There is the element of, you have to have a minimum amount of players on the roster as well. So you can't just send a bunch of guys out and create all these open, you have to have a certain amount of players on the roster at all times. So keep that in mind. But do you see just scanning the league, do you see, if you were to guess how the Celtics will operate aside from that salary cap move, do you think there's anything else coming?
I think I would keep an eye on the Kings. They're getting ready to reset that thing in a big, big way. I think what you can get with the Kings is you could get a Harrison Barnes. You could get a Buddy Hield. You could get guys who could really help you for this year and years beyond, but that would have to be Horford goes. And your pitch to the Kings is, hey, you can get off his, because they're clearly not going to the finals. You could get off his contract for $14.5 million next year, and that's it. It really reset. Now, that would probably also involve sending one or two of the kids. I don't think that's the end of the world with the way they've played. But we're not close enough to make a move like that right now. Two is that puts you closer next year and the years beyond. And I think that's the really important part to consider there, is that these moves now are about this year, next year. So I'd keep an eye on the Kings. And then Schröder, I struggle to see how he's on this roster on February 11th, the day after the trade deadline. I think he's going to be somewhere where I have no idea. I think it'll be a team that says, we're close. We need a point guard. We need a bench scorer. Let's go get Dennis Schröder, because any team in the league can acquire him, and off you go.
Okay, that all makes sense. I agree with you. If Dennis Schröder is on this team past the trade deadline, then I think that became a colossal mistake, because I obviously I have now grown into someone who I do strongly dislike Dennis Schröder's game. I don't like how he plays. I don't like the defensive deficiencies, and I also don't like how he's impacted other players on the team. So I think there is a level of addition by subtraction just by moving Schröder off the team. But beyond that, my prognostication, having thought about it for a few days here, I think Al Horford stays.
I do too.
I think there's uncertainty around Rob still enough where you kind of need, and I think you kind of need a rudder for the rest of the season. I think you just need that counterbalance. And it's worth keeping Horford just to keep some level of sanity in the locker room. I think he's valuable that way. Unless the Warriors are willing to give up Wiseman and Kuminga in that kind of move, and you were like, well, we got to do that, because now that changes. Now you've solidified a front court, and really, like, that's your front court of the future, and Kuminga could be a great piece for you. So, like, there's that notwithstanding, which I still don't expect, but I do think that Horford stays, except for that. I think you clear Schröder, you get the assets, you get the 2 seconds if you can for him, and you clear that salary. You have those other few guys that are there just in case you need to clear a little bit more. And then you operate, like I said before, with the TPEs that you mentioned, and see if you can be the third team. If Ben Simmons moves and whoever, Minnesota, says, okay, but we got to part with this guy, and you can pick somebody off of another team that's in that price range, great. If not, you carry Horford into the summer. That's when you move Al Horford. You allow him to say thanks to Boston and everything, and then you move forward, and that's, I think, now you create a package. He's the salary means a whole lot more, I think, over the summer than it does now. So
yep. It's that last part, not to interrupt you, but it's that last part that matters. I think most is Al Horford is somewhere between 14.5 million and 26.5 million of matching salary next summer in a trade. I think it's 26.5.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So if they just trade him straight up and without anything else, the matching portion is the guaranteed portion, 14.
Correct. Next year, yes. Yep.
Next year. But if they said, and the other team agreed, they said, okay, we're going to guarantee that now, then he becomes the 26 million.
Yep.
So he can be either or, however the other team wants it to show, which I think is an important distinction to make, because he can be two different kinds of contracts.
Yep. Yeah. If you're the other team and you're doing this as a straight salary move for you, we want out of this, or if you're saying, we're going to keep him around, maybe you do want him at the 26. So if you're dreaming of sign and trade possibilities, you want that ability next 14.5 or 26.5 range to be able to trade.
All right, so I think we're in the same spot here, where the Celtics have given themselves some flexibility financially. This is a whole lot of tax and cap stuff but it's important for team building. I think it's important for fans to understand. And there are a couple moves to be made. And, hopefully Dennis Schröder has his affairs in order so he can hop on that Delta flight to wherever on February 9th. Oh God, I'm just leaning into it. I'm leaning into it because I started out like, I do see the value of Dennis Schröder, but it's just grown to a point where I just, I'm at the point where I'm like ready to pack his bags for him.
I don't see the value on this team where they are at right now. That's my big thing.
That really is the big thing.
If they were good, fine, great. Keep going. If they were, if they even had 5-6 more wins, keep rolling with it. Run with it, and make it work for the rest of the year. But they're not. They're a 500 team, and my whole thing has been all along is, all right. So if you move them, you lose a few more games. I mean, is that the end of the world? And I'm also not even sold that you would, because I think Peyton Pritchard offers you different play. But I think it's also some ways necessary play. And it's not just Peyton Pritchard. It frees up minutes for Nesmith and Langford and others, because then you're not doing the minutes where you play Schröder and Smart together and all those things, which, we'll see. Hey, one last thing I want to pitch here, and this is going to sound weird, is I do not want Jason Tatum to make the All-Star team. I know that sounds horrible to root against guys to make the All-Star team, but this dude needs to sit on the couch for a week and put his feet up and watch cartoons with dudes.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I mean, it's just too much basketball for him in the last 2 years plus now. And I just, it has to factor in, because you don't lose the shooting touch like that just out of nowhere. It doesn't happen for this long of a period. I mean, we're a half season plus now of him not shooting well. So that's just my thing. He needs the time off, and there's no real financial ramifications to making the all-star team or anything. So that's just my thing. And now I would never say don't play hard, don't push for it. And of course I'll celebrate it if he makes it.
Sure.
There.
But
yeah, that's it's like, man, the time off would be better than anything else.
I get it. I agree. It's almost as if what would the best solution would be he makes it, and then I gotta back.
I can't play.
Thank you, but I can't play.
Yeah.
And then you sit out, you make it, you get it on your resume and all of that stuff. But
that would be fun too.
Yeah, but these players, we went through it with Kemba Walker, we went through it with everybody. The All-Star game is a big deal. And we, on the outside, very easy for me to say, no, just sit out. Just fake a back injury. Just say, I tweaked something, and then sit out for the week, because I 100% agree that would make total sense for him health-wise. I'm fully on board with everything that you said. But he's like, no, I'm going to go sit in a locker room with LeBron James and Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, and I'm going to go to parties with the elite of the NBA, because even though his ego and all of that stuff tells him he belongs there, there's no better confirmation than you belong there than like rubbing elbows with LeBron and KD and all these other, like, you're in a club, and that kind of club, you want to hang out in that club. And maybe you still go and you don't play or whatever, but like, that is super, super meaningful.
Sure. Yep.
I agree. But he was fourth in the fan voting, so that he's in. I think he's absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's also just this whole DeMar DeRozan at guard thing.
Yeah.
Leaves an east as it may look, so I do think that's going to go to Tatum.
Yeah. All right, Keith. Appreciate it. This is good stuff. We'll have you back on as the trade season rolls through, and I'm sure there's gonna be a lot more to talk about. So stay hydrated. Stretch out. Make sure that everything is. Get those like calculating fingers out. All right. Good talking to you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks to Keith for hopping on. Hopefully there's a lot of information in there. Hopefully that all made sense. You could always hit us up on Twitter to ask questions, clarifications. I'm John_Karalis on Twitter. He's at Keith Smith NBA. He's one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to salary cap and stuff like that. So check him out. And thanks again for hopping on. Thank you for watching, for listening, for subscribing. It's a Monday through Friday podcast that is free. Thank you for making it your first listen. Plenty of great options for your second listen. Locked On Bets with your boy Q, and Lee Sterling is going to get you some great advice for laying your money down over at BetOnline. The Locked On NBA podcast, which I host on Wednesdays, has the league covered. The Locked On Now podcast, which is a great recap of each game in the NBA from the local hosts, the local experts. Each side, you get to hear both sides of the game. So it's a great recap. Plenty of options for your second listen. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you for sharing the podcast as well. Tell your friends, tell everybody they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.